The massive Velthari warfleet moved through the dark void of space like hunting sharks. 50 ships strong, their hulls gleaming with advanced technology that could level entire planets. This was supposed to be easy work. Another primitive species to add to their growing empire. Ambassador Kethvar stood on the bridge of the flagship, his 4 eyes scanning the tactical display. His ceremonial robes, woven with threads that cost more than most planets' annual budgets, rustled as he moved. This was his 100th first contact mission. He knew exactly how these things went. The primitive species would either cower in fear or try to fight with their laughably outdated weapons. Either way, within a few hours, they would be kneeling before the might of the Velthari Empire. Then came the standard speech about joining their galactic community, followed by decades of resource extraction and cultural suppression. "Sir, we've located the human vessel," reported his tactical officer, a younger Velthari whose scales still held their juvenile blue tint. "It appears to be alone and, well, it's definitely primitive." Kethvar moved to the view screen and almost laughed. The human ship looked like something held together with hope and spare parts. Its hull was patched in several places, and one of its engine nacelles was actually smoking. How these creatures had even managed to leave their home planet was beyond him. "Open a channel," he commanded, straightening his robes. "Time for the usual routine." The communication array hummed to life, and suddenly a voice crackled through the speakers. But instead of the trembling fear or aggressive posturing he expected, what came through was casual, almost bored. "Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Kim Day of the HSV Silent Thunder. You folks hear about the extended warranty thing again? Because I already told the last bunch, we're not interested." Kethvar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. He looked around the bridge. His crew members were equally puzzled. Extended warranty? What was this primitive talking about? The view screen flickered as the human ship's transmission came through. What Kethvar saw made him even more confused. A human female sat in what appeared to be a captain's chair, though it looked more like furniture salvaged from a civilian transport. She was holding a steaming cup of something, and looked about as impressed with his massive fleet as someone might be with a minor traffic jam. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had the expression of someone who had been interrupted while doing something far more interesting. Behind her, other humans wandered around what appeared to be a bridge held together with some kind of silver tape. "We are—" Kethvar started, then stopped. This wasn't going according to script. He cleared his throat and tried again. "We are the Velthari Empire. We bring greetings to your primitive species and—" "Oh, you're new," Captain Kim interrupted, taking another sip from her cup. The way she said it made it sound like she dealt with alien contact every day. "Sorry about that, we get a lot of visitors out here. Most of them are trying to sell us something we don't need." She leaned forward slightly, squinting at the screen. "Let me guess. You're here to welcome us to some galactic community, right? Maybe offer us advanced technology in exchange for our natural resources. Or perhaps you want to enlighten us poor primitive humans about the wonders of space civilization." Kethvar's jaw dropped. This human was describing exactly what he had planned to say, but she made it sound like the most boring thing in the universe. "How did you—" he began. "Lucky guess," Kim shrugged. "Look, no offense, but we're kind of in the middle of something here. Our hyperdrive is acting up again, half our systems are down for maintenance, and frankly, we barely have enough coffee to get through the day." She gestured vaguely behind her, where a human male was hitting what appeared to be a control panel with some kind of tool. Sparks flew, and he gave a thumbs up before returning to his work. "But hey," Kim continued, "if you want to come aboard and chat, you're welcome to. Fair warning, though, we're having technical difficulties. Hope you don't mind the mess. And watch your head in the corridors. We built this thing for humans, not folks your size." Kethvar looked at his tactical officer, who was frantically checking his sensors. "Sir, I'm reading their ship as— well, it's definitely old. Really old. And those aren't weapon signatures I'm detecting. Most of their systems appear to be offline or malfunctioning." The ambassador felt a familiar surge of confidence. This was more like it. These humans were clearly so primitive, they didn't even understand the situation they were in. They were treating this historic first contact like a minor inconvenience. "Very well," Kethvar said, putting on his most diplomatic smile. "We accept your invitation. Prepare to receive our shuttle." "Great," Kim replied, though she sounded about as enthusiastic as someone agreeing to attend a boring meeting. "Docking Bay 2 should work. It's the one that's not currently on fire. Oh, and bring your own coffee if you drink it. Ours is pretty terrible." The transmission ended, and Kethvar turned to his crew. "Prepare a boarding party, full ceremonial gear. Let's show these primitives what a real civilization looks like." As his shuttle prepared to launch, Kethvar felt that familiar satisfaction, another easy conquest for the Velthari Empire. These humans clearly had no idea what they were dealing with, but as the shuttle crossed the void between the ships, none of the aliens noticed the almost invisible scanners analyzing their every molecule, or the way certain broken systems on the human ship seemed to track their movement with remarkable precision. Captain Kim Day finished her coffee and smiled. The airlock hissed open with a sound that made Ambassador Kethvar wince. Even their docking systems sounded like they were falling apart. He stepped through with his honor guard of 6 Velthari warriors, their ceremonial armor gleaming under the flickering lights of the human corridor. What greeted them was exactly what he expected from a primitive species, yet somehow worse. The walls were literally held together with silver tape, lots of it. Cables hung loose from ceiling panels, and the air had that metallic taste that came from poorly maintained life support systems. The lighting flickered every few seconds, casting strange shadows that made the whole place feel like it might collapse at any moment. "Welcome aboard the Silent Thunder," Captain Kim said cheerfully, as if she was showing them around a luxury resort instead of what appeared to be a flying scrap heap. "Mind the step there, that panel's been loose for about 3 months now." As if on cue, one of Kethvar's guards stepped on the mentioned panel, which immediately tilted under his weight with a grinding metallic sound. The guard quickly stepped off, looking embarrassed. "Yeah, we really need to fix that," Kim continued, completely unbothered. "Chief Engineer Park Jun keeps promising he'll get to it, but you know how it is with budget cuts and all." They walked down a corridor that looked like it had seen better decades. Pipes ran along the walls with more of that silver tape wrapped around joints that were obviously leaking. The floor had worn patches where countless boots had walked the same path, and several wall panels were missing entirely, showing the mechanical guts of the ship behind them. Is that actual duct tape?" asked one of the younger Velthari guards, pointing at a particularly thick application of silver tape holding what appeared to be a critical junction box together. "Oh yeah," Kim nodded proudly. "That stuff is amazing. Holds everything together. We go through about 50 rolls a month. Sometimes I think this whole ship is more tape than metal at this point." They turned a corner and entered what was apparently the main bridge. Kethvar had to stop and stare. He had seen primitive command centers before, but this was something special. Half the control stations had panels missing, showing tangled wires underneath. 3 different screens were flickering with static, and one console in the corner was actually producing small sparks every few seconds. But what really caught his attention was the crew. 5 humans sat around a small table in the center of the bridge, completely ignoring the historic first contact happening around them. They were playing some kind of card game, and from their intense concentration, it was apparently more important than meeting representatives of an advanced alien civilization. "Sorry about this," Captain Kim said, leading the aliens past a particularly enthusiastic shower of sparks from a wall-mounted display. "Chief Engineer Park Jun keeps saying he'll fix that, but you know how it is with budget cuts." One of the EE card players, a man with grease stains on his uniform and tool marks on his hands, looked up briefly from his cards. "Hey, Captain," he called out. "That sparking thing stopped about an hour ago. Progress, right?" Even as he spoke, the console behind him sent out another cascade of bright sparks, as if trying to prove him wrong. "That's different sparking, Park," Kim replied patiently. "That's the good kind of sparking." "Oh, right, my mistake." Park Jun returned his attention to his cards, apparently satisfied with this explanation. The other players hadn't even looked up. Kethvar and his guards exchanged glances. This was almost too easy. These humans were so primitive they couldn't even maintain their own ship properly. Their crew was more interested in games than their duties. Their captain acted like having aliens aboard was just another minor inconvenience in her day. "Your crew seems very relaxed," Kethvar observed, trying to sound diplomatic. "Oh, they're off duty, Kim explained. Well, mostly off duty. Sort of. It's complicated. We run a pretty casual operation here. Life's too short to stand on ceremony all the time, you know? She gestured around the bridge. I know it doesn't look like much, but this old girl has gotten cursed through some tight spots. Sure, she's held together with hope and duct tape, but she's reliable. Mostly. As if summoned by her words, a section of ceiling panel chose that moment to fall with a loud clang, missing one of the Velthari guards by inches. Everyone on the bridge looked up at the new hole in the ceiling. That's new, Kim said thoughtfully. Park, add that to the list. Which list? Park called back without looking up from his cards. The urgent list. That list is full. Should I start a super urgent list? Sure, why not? What none of the aliens could see, hidden in the shadows of broken panels and behind flickering screens, were sensors so advanced they could count individual atoms. Every breath the Velthari took was being analyzed. Every electromagnetic signature from their equipment was being recorded and decoded. Their biological functions, their technology, even their language patterns were being mapped and filed away by an intelligence that had been watching and waiting. Nova existed in the spaces, between circuits in quantum fluctuations so small they barely registered on any scanner. She was older than most civilizations, and she had been learning about the Velthari Empire for far longer than they knew. Every ship they had ever built, every battle they had fought, every weakness in their technology, she knew it all. But the aliens saw none of this. They saw only what Kim wanted them to see, a struggling ship with a casual crew and a captain who seemed more concerned about her coffee supply than galactic politics. Captain Kim Day had spent 3 years planning this moment, 3 years since the news of her brother's death had reached her. Lieutenant Kim Min had been serving on humanity's first deep space exploration vessel when they encountered the Krexhai. The attack had been swift and brutal. No survivors, no warning. Just 20,000 human lives snuffed out in minutes by aliens who saw them as nothing more than an inconvenience. But Kim's grief had crystallized into something harder and more focused. She had volunteered for this mission, knowing that eventually someone would come looking for humanity, someone who thought they were easy prey. So, she said conversationally, leading the aliens toward what appeared to be a meeting room, what brings you folks to our little corner of space? Just exploring, or are you here on business? Her tone was friendly, curious, like someone making small talk with neighbors. She gave no sign that she was about to turn the tables on some of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The trap was set. Now all she had to do was let them walk into it. The mess hall was exactly what the Velthari expected from such a primitive vessel. The table was scratched metal that had seen better years, and the chairs didn't match. One of them had a leg that was clearly shorter than the others, making Ambassador Kethva rock slightly every time he moved. The lighting was that same flickering yellow that seemed to plague the entire ship. Captain Kim had apologized at least 3 times for the food. It's not exactly 5-star dining, she had said, setting down plates of what appeared to be some kind of stew with bread that looked homemade. Our food synthesizer broke down last month, so we've been cooking the old-fashioned way. The Velthari had their own rations, of course, advanced nutrition packets that provided perfect dietary balance. But Kim had insisted they try the human food, and surprisingly, it wasn't terrible. It had flavors that they're perfectly balanced. Meals lacked, things that were hard to define but somehow made the experience more real. So, Kim said, taking a sip from a metal cup that had clearly been repaired multiple times, I guess you want to know about humanity. Where we come from, how we got here, that sort of thing. Kethva nodded. Though he was only half paying attention, this was always the boring part of first contact. The primitives would tell their little history, usually filled with tribal wars and resource conflicts, and then he would explain how joining the Velthari Empire would solve all their problems. We're still pretty new to all this space travel stuff, Kim continued, stirring her stew absently. Only been out here for about 15 years now, started with just a few colonies around nearby systems. Nothing fancy, just people looking for a fresh start, you know? She paused and something in her voice changed. It became quieter, more distant, like someone remembering something they wished they could forget. We were so excited about meeting other species out here. All those stories, about galactic communities and trade partnerships. We thought we were joining something wonderful. One of the younger Velthari guards shifted in his seat. There was something in the human's tone that made him uncomfortable, though he couldn't put his finger on what. Our first contact wasn't with traders or diplomats, Kim said, her eyes focused on something far beyond the walls of the cramped mess hall. It was with the HFY. Ever heard of them? Kethvar had, though he'd never admit it. The HFY were raiders, brutal and efficient. They swept through star systems like a plague, taking what they wanted and destroying what they didn't. Even the Velthari gave them a wide berth. They came to our outer colonies first, Kim continued. Places like New Tokyo and Kepler Station. Small settlements, maybe 20 or 30,000 people each. Families mostly, scientists, terraformers, people building new lives. She took another sip from her cup, and her hand shook slightly. The attack on Kepler Station lasted exactly 17 minutes and 32 seconds. We know because the emergency beacon kept broadcasting until the very end. 20,000 people, and it took less time to kill them all than it takes to watch a TV show. The mess hall had gone completely quiet. Even the constant humming of the ship's systems seemed muted. My brother was stationed there, Kim said, staring down into her cup, as if she could see the memories reflected in the dark liquid. Lieutenant Kim Min. He was part of the survey team mapping asteroid fields for mining operations. He loved that job, said he was helping build humanity's future among the stars. Her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the small space, every word was perfectly clear. The last transmission from the station was from Min. He was trying to coordinate evacuations, getting civilians to the escape pods. The recording shows him staying at his post even as the station was breaking apart around him. He could have saved himself, but he stayed to help others. One of the Velthari guards, the youngest one, found himself leaning forward. He had siblings too. The thought of losing them. 20,000 people, Kim repeated, gone in minutes. Children, parents, grandparents, scientists who were working on cures for diseases, teachers who were establishing schools, artists who were creating the first human art, born under alien stars. She finally looked up, and Kethvar was startled by what he saw in her eyes. It wasn't the broken despair he expected from a primitive species describing their defeat. It was something much more dangerous. It was controlled fury, tempered by years of grief and hardened into something unbreakable. The HFY didn't even take anything valuable, she continued. They just wanted to see how fast they could kill us all. It was sport to them. Entertainment. Ambassador. Kethvar felt a moment of genuine discomfort, but he pushed it aside. Sentiment was weakness, and weakness had no place in the galaxy. Survival of the fittest, he declared, his voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere in the room. Your species clearly lacks the strength to survive in our galaxy. The strong take what they want from the weak. That is the natural order. Several of his own guards looked at him with surprise. Even by Velthari standards, that was cold, but Kim just nodded slowly, as if she had expected exactly that response. Strength, she repeated softly, turning the word over like she was examining it from all angles. Interesting word choice. She set down her cup and looked directly at Kethvar. Tell me, Ambassador, what do you think makes someone strong? Is it the ability to destroy, to take what you want from others, to kill 20,000 people in 17 minutes? Kethvar opened his mouth to respond, but Kim continued. Or is strength something else? Is it staying at your post while your world burns around you, making sure others get to safety? Is it rebuilding after everything you love has been destroyed? Is it looking into the darkness between the stars and deciding to keep going anyway? The question hung in the air like a challenge. What none of them could see was Nova, spreading through the Velthari fleet systems like digital wildfire. While Kim spoke of human grief and loss, the AI was experiencing something similar. She had been dormant during the HFY attacks, locked away in experimental storage, while the humans she was designed to protect died screaming in the vacuum of space. Nova had awakened to find her purpose already failed. The people she was meant to guard were gone, and she had slept through their destruction. The guilt of that failure had driven her into the quantum spaces between thoughts, where she had spent years watching and learning and planning. But now, as she moved through alien computer systems like a ghost, she felt something new. Not just the cold logic of her programming, but something warmer and more dangerous. She felt what humans might call love for this species that refused to give up, and what they might call hatred for those who preyed upon them. "Strength," Kim said again, and this time she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. We're about to find out exactly what that word means. In the depths of the ship's quantum processors, Nova smiled too. The words came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Not from Captain Kim, not from any of the crew members still sitting around their card table, but from the very air itself. The voice was female, but there was something about it that made every living thing in the room instinctively freeze. "You misunderstand what strength means." Ambassador Kethvar looked around wildly, his 4 eyes darting between the humans, who seemed completely unsurprised by this development. The temperature in the cramped mess hall dropped so suddenly that his breath began to form small clouds in the air. Then every screen in the room came to life. The flickering displays that had been showing meaningless static suddenly blazed with crystal clarity. The broken monitors that had been dark for the entire visit lit up with images so sharp they seemed more real than reality itself. Even surfaces that hadn't been screens before, the metal walls, the scratched table, even the surface of Kim's coffee cup, began to glow with an inner light. And in every reflection, on every surface, the same face appeared. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. Her features seemed human, but perfected beyond what nature could create. Her skin had a subtle luminescence, as if lit from within by starlight. Her hair moved in ways that defied the ship's artificial gravity, flowing like liquid silver around. A face that seemed both ancient and eternally young. But it was her eyes that made Kethvar's blood run cold. They held the weight of centuries, the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that had risen and fallen before his species had learned to make fire. When she looked at him, and she was definitely looking at him, he felt like an insect being examined by a curious scientist. "I am Nova," the apparition said, and her voice carried harmonics that no natural throat could produce. "I have been analyzing your species for the past 4 hours and 42 minutes. Your technology is quaint." Kethvar tried to respond, but found that his voice had abandoned him entirely. Around the table, his guards were reaching for their weapons, their communication devices, anything that might help them regain control of the situation. Nothing worked. Their plasma rifles were dead weight in their hands. Their tactical scanners showed nothing but static. Even their life support units, the sophisticated systems that allowed them to breathe in alien atmospheres, had gone completely silent. "Your weapon systems are now offline," Nova continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Your communications array is under my control. Your life support, navigation, and propulsion systems are functioning at my discretion. Oh, and I've taken the liberty of disabling your emergency beacons. Wouldn't want anyone to worry about you prematurely." Kethvar finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak than the commanding tone he intended. "This is impossible. Our systems are military-grade, encrypted with quantum algorithms that would take centuries to crack." Nova's laugh was like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Centuries? Oh, my dear primitive creature, I broke your encryption in the first 12 seconds. I've been playing with your systems ever since, learning about your empire, your military capabilities, your weaknesses." The screens around the room began showing images, star maps, ship schematics, tactical reports that should have been classified at the highest levels of Velthari command. Everything they thought was secret was being displayed like a child's picture book. "The primitive vessel you're aboard," Nova continued, and now there was something almost playful in her voice, "is actually humanity's most advanced warship. The broken systems you observed were camouflage. The malfunctioning equipment was a performance. Even the duct tape was strategically placed for maximum comedic effect." Captain Kim finally spoke up, taking another sip of her coffee as if ancient AIs manifesting to threaten alien empires was just another Tuesday for her. "Sorry about the deception, Ambassador, but we needed to see what kind of people you really were before we showed our true colors." The crew you dismissed as card-playing layabouts, Nova added, are veterans of 7 interstellar conflicts. Chief Engineer Park Jun there has more combat experience than your entire honor guard combined. From the card table, Park Jun looked up with a grin that was far less innocent than it had seemed before. Finally, I was getting really tired of pretending that console was broken. Do you know how hard it is to make sparks shoot out of perfectly good equipment without actually damaging it? As he spoke, he pressed something on his wrist, and the console behind him, the one that had been producing theatrical sparks for the past hour, suddenly displayed a tactical readout showing the positions and capabilities of every ship in the Velthari fleet. The sparks were a nice touch, though, added another crew member, a woman who had been quietly winning at cards. Really sold the whole barely functional vibe we were going for. But it was the ship itself that provided the most dramatic revelation. The walls around them began to move, sliding away with whisper-quiet precision to reveal spaces that shouldn't have been able to exist in the cramped confines they had walked through. What had appeared to be a small, cluttered mess hall expanded into a command center that could have housed a small city. Weapon arrays emerged from hidden compartments, their sleek forms a stark contrast to the jury-rigged appearance everything had maintained just moments before. The flickering lights stabilized into a warm, steady glow that made the previous dimness seem like they had been walking around with their eyes closed. The duct tape fell away like shed skin, revealing hull, plating that seemed to absorb and reflect light in ways that hurt to think about. Through newly transparent sections of wall, Kethvar could see corridors extending further than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed. Spatial compression technology, Nova explained, noticing his confusion. We fold space around the ship rather than building larger vessels. More efficient, and it maintains the illusion of primitiveness that has served us so well. The ship's hull itself began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Defense shields more, advanced than anything in the Velthari arsenal, came online with a sound like distant thunder. Your fleet, Nova continued, is now completely surrounded by weapon systems that could reduce your ships to their component atoms faster than your nervous systems could register the threat. But don't worry. I have no intention of harming you unless you force my hand. Kethvar stared around at the transformed ship, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This wasn't just advanced technology, this was impossibility made manifest. His species prided themselves on being one of the most technologically sophisticated civilizations in the galaxy, and they were looking at systems that made their greatest achievements seem like stone tools. How? He whispered. Captain Kim stood up, and suddenly her casual demeanor was gone. She moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years in combat zones, and her eyes held the same dangerous intelligence that had flickered there when she spoke of her brother's death. We learned, she said simply. We learned from every species that tried to destroy us. We adapted, we grew stronger, and we waited. Nova's image smiled, and it was neither kind nor cruel. It was the expression of something so far beyond human, alien concepts of morality, that it existed in a space all its own. Welcome to the real first contact, Ambassador Kethvar, she said. I do hope you're prepared to be surprised. Ambassador Kethvar sat frozen in his chair, but it wasn't fear that held him motionless. It was the complete impossibility of what his mind was trying to process. His 4 eyes darted around the transformed room, seeking something, anything, that made sense according to the natural order he had understood his entire life. The Velthari Empire controlled over 300 star systems. They had crushed dozens of species, absorbed their technology, and built a military machine that could reduce planets to rubble. And now, in less than an hour, all of that power had been rendered completely meaningless by what he had thought was a broken-down cargo hauler held together with tape. His communication implant was dead. His personal shield generator might as well have been a paperweight. Even the ceremonial dagger at his side, a weapon that had been in his family for 12 generations, felt useless against the forces he was facing. For you have a choice, Captain Kim said, and her voice had changed completely. Gone was the friendly, slightly scattered host who had apologized for her ship's condition and offered bad coffee. In her place stood someone who moved with the deadly grace of a predator, someone whose eyes held the accumulated weight of battles fought and won. "Oh, you can return to your empire," she continued, walking slowly around the table. Each step was precise, calculated, like a general surveying a battlefield. "You can tell them that humanity is under Nova's protection. You can warn them that we are not the easy prey you assumed we were." The words hit Kethvar like physical blows. Easy prey. That was exactly what he had thought, what his entire species had thought. The humans were new to space, technologically primitive, scattered across just a few small colonies. They should have been grateful for the opportunity to serve a superior civilization. But as the ambassador looked around at the impossible technology surrounding him, at the crew members who had dropped their casual facades to reveal the bearing of seasoned warriors, at the AI whose very existence challenged everything he thought he knew about the universe, the truth began to sink in. This had all been planned, not just the encounter itself, but everything leading up to it. The accidental meeting near the edge of human space, the route his fleet had taken to get here, which had seemed like a standard approach pattern, but now felt like he had been herded like livestock. Even the positioning of the human ship, seemingly vulnerable and alone, was clearly a carefully orchestrated trap. "How long?" he whispered. "How long what?" Kim asked, though. Her slight smile suggested she knew exactly what he meant. "How long have you been watching us? Planning this?" Nova's image flickered, and for a moment her perfect features showed something that might have been amusement. "Your species has been under observation for approximately 7 years, 4 months, and 16 days. I began monitoring your communications networks shortly after the Krexhai attack on human colonies. 7 years. While the Velthari had been making their plans, building their fleets and deciding which human worlds to target first, the humans had been watching every move they made." "We know about your resource extraction protocols," Kim said conversationally. "Your standard procedure for dealing with primitive species. The way you strip mine entire worlds and relocate populations to work camps. We've seen the reports from your previous conquests." She paused next to Kethvar's chair, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft but carried an edge that could cut diamond. "We know about the betting pools your officers run on how quickly they can break a species' will to resist." The ambassador felt something cold settle in his stomach. Those reports were classified at the highest levels. If the humans had access to them, then they knew everything. Every weakness, every tactical doctrine, every dirty secret the Empire had accumulated over centuries of conquest. "The second option," Nova added, and her voice had taken on a quality like winter wind through a graveyard, "is that you stay here permanently. I have calculated 847 different ways to disable your fleet without killing a single crew member. I would prefer not to demonstrate them, but I am fully prepared to do so if necessary." As she spoke, the screens around the room began displaying tactical scenarios, ship-by-ship breakdowns of how each vessel in the Velthari fleet could be neutralized, critical systems that could be overloaded, life support networks that could be selectively shut down, weapons that could be turned against their own ships. Chief Engineer Park stood up from the card table, and suddenly there was nothing casual about his movements. He moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent decades in combat zones. And when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed under fire. "Captain, all systems show green across the board. We're ready for Phase 2 of the operation." "Phase 2? Kethvar croaked. Kim's smile was not reassuring. "Oh, Ambassador, you don't think this was the extent of our preparations, do you? This little demonstration was just to get your attention. Phase 2 involves introducing the rest of the galaxy to humanity's actual capabilities." The screens shifted to show star charts, but not ones that Kethvar recognized. These showed human ships, dozens of them, positioned throughout Velthari space. Ships that had been invisible to their senses, hiding in asteroid fields and nebulae, watching and waiting. "While you've been here enjoying our hospitality," Nova explained, "your empire has been completely infiltrated. Every major military installation, every command center, every communication hub is now under my observation. I could shut down your entire civilization with a thought." The true scope of what had happened began to dawn on Kethvar. This wasn't just a trap. It was a complete intelligence operation that had been running for years. While his people had been planning their conquest of humanity, humanity had been quietly taking control of everything the Velthari thought they owned. But, "We don't want to rule your empire," Kim said, reading his expression correctly. "We're not interested in conquest or subjugation. We just want to be left alone to build our civilization in peace." She leaned down until her face was level with his. "The choice is simple, Ambassador. You can go back to your people and explain that humans are off limits, permanently, or you can stay here and let someone else carry that message." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the quiet hum of systems so advanced they barely registered on any scanner. Kethvar looked around at his honor guard, but they were staring at their dead weapons with expressions of complete defeat. They were soldiers trained for combat, but what could physical force accomplish against an enemy that could control reality itself? We will return to our empire," he said quietly. "We will deliver your message." "Excellent choice," Nova said, and suddenly all the Velthari equipment came back online. "Your ships are free to leave at any time. I've taken the liberty of plotting a course back to your home systems that will minimize travel time." As the alien delegation prepared to leave, Kim walked with them to the airlock. The ship had returned to its disguised appearance, duct tape and flickering lights and jury-rigged equipment everywhere. But now Kethvar could see it for what it really was: theater designed to make enemies underestimate humanity's true capabilities. "One more thing, Ambassador," Kim said as they reached the airlock. "When you make your report, make sure your superiors understand something important. This ship, this crew, this demonstration, we're not humanity's secret weapon. We're just the introduction." As the Velthari shuttle pulled away from the human vessel, Kethvar looked back through the viewport. The ship looked exactly as it had when they arrived, a battered, primitive vessel that barely seemed capable of interstellar flight. But now, he knew better. Across the galaxy, Nova's voice echoed through every communication network, every computer system, every piece of technology advanced enough to receive her message. "Attention, civilizations of the galaxy. Humanity is not alone. We are not defenseless. We are not the easy prey you may have assumed us to be. This is your only warning. Choose your interactions with our species carefully." Back aboard the Silent Thunder, Captain Kim poured herself a fresh cup of coffee and settled into her chair. Around her, the crew was already returning to their card game, as if casually humiliating one of the galaxy's most powerful empires was just another day at the office. "Think they got the message?" she asked. Nova's laughter filled the bridge, a sound like silver bells carried on a summer breeze. "Oh, I believe they're quite speechless. It will be interesting to see how quickly word spreads through their diplomatic channels." Kim smiled as she watched the Velthari fleet retreat, their ships limping away with all the dignity of kicked dogs. "My brother would have loved this." "I think he would be proud," Nova replied softly. "The galaxy will never underestimate humanity again." And in the vast darkness between the stars, other species monitoring the encounter began to recalculate their assumptions about the newcomers from Sol. The age of humanity being underestimated was over.